رحم الله من قرأ سورة الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم. Hussain's torn body lies upon the plains of Karbala. Shimr comes and sits upon the chest of Hussain. He grabs him by the beard and pulls him towards him, and without any mercy in his heart begins to hack away at the neck of Aba Abdullah al-Hussain. This is the neck which was kissed by Sayyida Zainab. This is the neck that was cut whilst it was thirsty. Shimr comes and hacks away at the neck of Aba Abdullah. He strikes him once and twice and again until after 12 strikes, the neck of Hussain is severed. He takes the head of Hussain in his hands and he raises it aloft. He places that head upon a spike. Zainab runs into the camps. Zainab runs out of the camps. Zainab is having to see the body of Aba Abdullah al-Hussain being torn to pieces. Zainab must return back towards the camps to look after the children. With Hussein's body lying upon the plains of Karbala, the enemies call out, "Gather 10 men, put them on horses, and let us trample the body of Aba Abdullah." Hussein's body is attacked. Hussein's body has already been attacked whilst he was alive, but they continue to attack him after he had been slain. One individual comes and begins to take the clothes of Hussain. They come and take his imama. One comes and even takes his slippers. One individual tries to take his clothes and he grabs hold of his hand, even after his martyrdom. One narration says that an individual wants to come and take the ring of Aba Abdullah al-Hussain. He comes to try to take the ring and begins to cut at his finger. But because the finger is not being cut, he comes and takes the arm of Aba Abdullah and at the risk takes and chops the arm of Hussain ibn Ali off, taking the entire hand of Hussain off with him. This is the way in which they plundered the body of Aba Abdullah. As this body was cut to pieces, they now surrounded and said, "Bring us 10 men that will perform the trampling of the body of Aba Abdullah al-Hussain." Can you picture this scene where the grandson of Rasulullah is lying upon the plains of Karbala, the body of Aba Abdullah al-Hussain? The narration says that Sayyida Zainab returns back towards the camps. She begins to wake up Zainul Abidin to prepare him to come and protect the children, to wake him up from the attack that is about to ensue. At this moment, she begins to cry. She begins to hear the galloping horses' hooves. She turns towards Zainul Abidin and says, "Zainul Abidin, what is that sound that I hear?" The narration says, Zainul Abidin, lying upon the ground, takes the bottom of the tent and lifts it up in order to see out into the plains of Karbala. He begins to cry, and with his broken voice, he says, "Oh Auntie Zainab, that sound that you are hearing is the sound of the horses' hooves galloping upon the body of my father Hussain." At this moment, they begin to trample upon the horses' hooves. We hear that Hussein's chest had become trampled so much that his chest resembled like when a woman begins to knead the dough and begins to roll the dough. That is how soft the chest of Hussain ibn Ali had become from the horses' hooves. They begin to attack the tents. The narration says that the first attack happened upon the daughter of Aba Abdullah by the name of Fatima as-Sughra. Fatima is maybe 8 or 10 years old, just a young girl. The narration says that after the beheading of Hussain, after the trampling of the body of Hussain, Fatima as-Sughra is standing outside the tents. At this moment, she says, one of the horses galloped towards the tents. I was standing outside. I did not know which way to flee. So I began to run towards the left and I began to run towards the right. Imagine when the daughters of Rasulullah say, I don't know which way to run. I would just flee in any direction in which I could. Oh, come and see. This is the situation of the daughters of Rasulullah. After only a few years of the death of Rasulullah, that she says, I just run in any direction in which I can. She says that the horseman began to approach me. He rode towards me. I fled in whichever direction I could. As I began to flee, the horseman caught up to me. He took his spear and with the flat side, he began to strike me on my back. I fell towards the floor. I fell unconscious. When I woke my auntie My auntie Kurthum was attending to me and stroking my head. She was looking down at me and saying, child, are you okay? I realized that my veil had been snatched. I looked up into the eyes of my auntie and said, oh auntie, my veil has been snatched from me. Is there any piece of cloth that you can give me to cover myself with? My auntie Kurthum responded and said, oh child, on this night even your auntie Kurthum does not have a veil, because they snatched the veil from the daughter of Fatima az-Zahra, from the daughter of Ali ibn Abi Talib. They began to attack the tents. The narration state that as they enter into the tents, they began to ransack whatever they could. They snatched whatever of Muharram. He says, I was watching these tents be ablazed. I saw them setting light to the tents. The women and the children were fleeing from one tent to another, from another tent to another. When they would go to one tent, they would set fire to this. And so the women and children flee towards another tent. Eventually, I saw a scene which was so tragic to me. He says, I saw a scene whereby there was a woman, a very tall woman, and she would go from one tent to another gathering the children. As she went into one of these tents, the tents become ablazed. She would go into this tent and she would run out of this tent. She would run into this tent and she would run out of this very tent. But this tent was ablaze and was set fire to. I began to fear that if she stays in this tent, that she would be caught ablaze as well. Having run out of the tent, she would look up into the night sky. She would run back into the tent. Eventually, she stayed in this tent so long that I feared that she would also be burnt inside this tent. Eventually, I saw her come out of this tent, but this time she was carrying a man on her back. I came towards her and I said to her, lady, who are you and who is this man that you carry out of the tent? She looked at me and said, I am Zainab bint Ali and this is Ali ibn al-Hussein. Zain al-Abidin is too weak to be able to stand up, and so I take him out of the tent before he burns. Sayyida Zainab saved Imam Zain al-Abidin on this night. Sayyida Zainab is the one who saved Imamat by saving Zain al-Abidin from being burnt alive in that tent. The narration state that the daughter of Hussein, Sakina, runs out of that burning tent. She has fire. Are you going to slap me? Are you going to take something from me? The man responds and says, oh girl, I am neither from you nor against you. I am just someone watching these events. Tell me, what is it that I can do for you? This child looks up at this man and says, oh man, if you are not from us or against us, then I ask you one thing and one thing only. The narration states that she goes out into the darkness in order to find a child. She goes out and files one of the children. She sits down beside this child in order to wake this child up. But the child does not breathe. The child does not move. She sits down beside this child in order to cry upon it. Sayyidah Kulthum comes out to find Sayyidah Zainab. Oh Zainab, my sister, did you find children? She says, I found them, but we were too late. They have already died due to the thirst, due to the heat that has overcome them. Eventually, Sayyidah Zainab manages to gather the children and brings them under one banner, sits down beside them and begins to make them calm. She has to feed each and every one of them water. She has to give each and every one of them a small amount of food. This is the same children that when they wanted water, they were crying out, Al-Atash, Al-Atash. They were not given any water. Finally, as the night comes, they are given a few drops of water. The Khutaba tell us that they imagine that when water was passed to each of the children, they would pass it on to another child saying, you drink first, you drink first. That maybe they would have given water to Imam al-Baqir. Imam al-Baqir would have given water to Fatima al-Sughra. Fatima al-Sughra would have given water to Sakina. And Sakina would have taken the water saying, oh Asghar, Asghar, you wanted water. Water has now come. Oh Asghar, let me quench your thirst. As if to say, oh Asghar, I want you to drink water now. Eventually, as the children are quietened down, Sayyidah Zainab sits outside that smoldering tent. She sits outside the children that now must have a few moments of rest and a few moments of sleep. The narration tells us that Sayyidah Zainab on this night performed her Salat al-Layl sitting. Zainul Abidin comes to her and says, Ya Ammata, oh my auntie, Limada tusallina Salat al-Layl an julus. Why do you recite your Salat al-Layl sitting? Why aren't you standing up and reciting your Salat al-Layl? She says, oh Sajjad, I am so tired and fatigued. My knees have become weak. I am so aggrieved. I do not have the strength to stand up to recite my Salat al-Layl. Zainul Abidin sits and lies and gathers his strength. Sayyidah Zainab sits outside those smoldering tents, keeping eye and watch upon the children. One narration tells us that as she is sitting outside, coming close to me, I will complain to my father about you. The man disembarks from his horse, walks towards Sayyidah Zainab and says, oh my daughter Zainab, do you not recognize your father Ali ibn Abi Talib? I was with you from the time in which you were turned away from Kufa. I have been with you the entire time. Oh Zainab, rest a few hours, because tomorrow you will have a long day. Tomorrow you must be walking through all the shuhada. Tomorrow you will be taken, paraded from city to city. The children need you, Zainab. Sleep a few hours and I will protect the caravan tonight. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. Please join me in dua. Raise your hands aloft with these tears. اللهم ارزقنا في الدنيا زيارة الحسين وفي الآخرة شفاعة الحسين واحشرنا يوم القيامة مع الحسين وندخلنا الجنة في باب الحسين عليه السلام.